Let me start with a question that might make you a little uncomfortable. Do you really make your own decisions? We like to believe we're in charge of our thoughts, actions, and choices. We imagine ourselves as independent, logical beings who weigh pros and cons before making a move. But the truth is far darker and far more unsettling. Every day you're being guided, nudged, and manipulated by hidden triggers you don't even notice. These triggers aren't obvious. They're not giant flashing signs that say, do this or buy that. They're subtle, invisible forces, tiny details in your environment, carefully chosen words, even fleeting facial expressions that can hijack your brain in an instant. And here's the scariest part. Once you learn how they work, you'll start to see them everywhere. In ads, in conversations, in the way strangers interact with you, even in how your own loved ones speak to you. But before we dive into the dark mechanics of these hidden triggers, let me give you a chilling example. Imagine you're walking into a coffee shop. You've already decided you'll just grab a small black coffee, nothing fancy. But as you step up to the counter, the barista smiles warmly and casually asks, "Would you like to try our special vanilla latte today?" Most of our customers are loving it. Now pause. Your brain just got hit with multiple psychological triggers in a single sentence. Social proof. Most of our customers are loving it. That little phrase makes you think, if everyone else likes it, maybe I should try it too. A scarcity/immediacy, the way it's framed today, subtly suggests it's a limited opportunity. Authority bias. The barista, as the coffee expert, is nudging you with a recommendation. The positive emotion trigger. That warm smile? It lowers your defenses, making you more likely to comply. Before you know it, you're nodding your head and saying, "Sure, why not? Congratulations. You just bought something you didn't plan to buy." All because your mind was quietly manipulated by hidden triggers. The human brain is wired to make shortcuts. These shortcuts, psychologists call them heuristics, save us time and energy. Instead of carefully analyzing every single choice, we rely on signals, patterns, and automatic responses. For example, if a product is expensive, you might assume it's high quality. If someone dresses sharply, you might assume they're competent. If a group of people are laughing at a joke, you're more likely to laugh too, even if you didn't find it funny. These are shortcuts. They're efficient. They're automatic. And they're exactly what manipulators exploit. Think about it. If you had to analyze every little detail in your day, you'd be paralyzed by decision fatigue. So your brain takes the easy route. But that easy route is also the perfect opening for hidden psychological triggers. Here's another trick that's as terrifying as it is effective. Priming. Priming happens when you're subtly exposed to an idea, word, or image, and it influences your behavior later without you realizing it. In one famous study, researchers split people into two groups. One group read words associated with old age, like wrinkled, gray, and Florida. The other group read neutral words. Afterward, both groups were asked to walk down a hallway. The group exposed to old age words literally walked slower than the other group without knowing why. That's the power of priming. Just a single subtle exposure can change your behavior minutes later. Now imagine how marketers, politicians, and social influencers use this on you. Think about how slogans, images, or even background music in stores can prime you to spend more, feel a certain way, or vote a certain way. You're not immune. No one is. Here's a trigger that works almost every time. Anchoring. Suppose I ask you, is the population of Turkey more or less than 80 million? Then I ask, what do you think the actual population is? Most people will give an answer close to 80 million, even if they don't know the true number. That's anchoring. The first number you hear sticks in your brain and influences your judgment. Marketers exploit this constantly. Imagine you see a price tag, originally $2.99, now just $99. Your brain is anchored to the higher number. Suddenly, 99 feels like a bargain, even if the product was never worth $299 in the first place. Anchoring doesn't just affect money. It affects negotiations, first impressions, even dating. The first detail you're given sets the anchor, and your mind struggles to move too far from it. Have you ever noticed how some people just click with you instantly? You feel like you've known them forever, even if you just met. Often, that's not an accident, it's a manipulation tactic called mirroring. When someone subtly copies your body language, tone of voice, or even breathing rhythm, your brain interprets it as similarity. And similarity builds trust. For example, if you cross your arms and the person in front of you casually does the same, your subconscious says, "Ah, we're alike. I like this person." Mirroring is one of the simplest, most effective hidden triggers in persuasion. Salespeople, negotiators, and even con artists use it constantly. And unless you're paying close attention, you won't notice it's happening. Triggers don't just come from people, they also come from your surroundings. Ever wonder why casinos pump oxygen into the air, use bright lights, and eliminate clocks? It's designed to disorient you, keep you awake, and make you lose track of time. Every detail is engineered to increase the chances that you'll keep playing, keep spending, and keep losing. Fast food restaurants? They use hard seats, loud music, and bright colors, not to make you comfortable, but to get you in and out quickly so more customers can be served. Supermarkets put the essentials, like milk and bread, at the very back so you're forced to walk past dozens of other tempting items. That layout isn't random. It's psychological manipulation at scale. The scarcity illusion, one of the most powerful triggers, is scarcity. When something seems limited, rare, or exclusive, your brain instantly assigns it more value. Think about it. Which sounds more appealing? You can buy this anytime. Scarcity creates urgency. It makes you act faster, often before you have time to think clearly. That's why online shopping sites constantly flash countdown timers. Only 2 seats left notices, or limited edition labels. Even relationships aren't safe from this trick. Some people deliberately make themselves less available. Knowing scarcity will make others chase harder. It's not about genuine connection, it's about manipulation. Here's the dark truth. These triggers rarely appear alone. Skilled manipulators layer them together, weaving a web that's nearly impossible to escape. Imagine this scenario. You're browsing an online store. You see a product listed at $299, but today only it's discounted to $99, anchoring plus scarcity. Next to the product, you see dozens of 5-star reviews, social proof. The site shows 2 people are viewing this right now, urgency. And there's a timer counting down from 15 minutes, fear of missing out. Within minutes, you've clicked buy. Not because you rationally decided you needed the product, but because a web of hidden triggers ensnared your mind. Now, you might be thinking, okay, I'll just stay aware and resist these triggers. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Awareness doesn't always protect you. Even when you know about priming, anchoring, or scarcity, your subconscious can still be influenced. You can't switch off the human wiring that makes you vulnerable. The best you can do is slow down, question your impulses, and recognize when you might be under the spell of a hidden trigger. But here's where things get even darker. Because hidden triggers don't just control your small purchases or everyday decisions. They also control your loyalty, your obedience, and your very sense of morality. And that's exactly what we'll explore in the next chapter. Why people obey, even when obedience goes against everything they believe in. Do you really make your own decisions? Most of us like to believe we're in control, that our thoughts and choices belong to us. We imagine ourselves as independent thinkers, guided by reason and logic. But the darker truth is this. Every single day, you are nudged, steered, and manipulated by forces you don't even notice. They're subtle, almost invisible. They show up in tiny details, in the tone of a stranger's voice, in the way a room is designed, or in the words someone chooses when they speak to you. These hidden triggers are so effective that once you learn to spot them, you'll see them everywhere. In advertisements, in conversations, in relationships, and even in your own behavior. Imagine walking into a coffee shop. You've already decided you'll just grab a small black coffee, nothing fancy. But when you reach the counter, the barista smiles warmly and says, "Would you like to try our special vanilla latte today?" Most of our customers are loving it. That single sentence, paired with that smile, is packed with invisible triggers. The mention of other customers makes you feel like you're missing out if you say no. The word "today" plants the idea that this is a limited opportunity. The barista's role gives their suggestion more weight, because your brain is wired to see them as the coffee expert. And that warm smile lowers your guard. Before you know it, you've agreed to buy something you never planned on buying. You didn't choose freely, you were guided. Why do these triggers work so well? The answer lies in how our brains are wired. To save energy, we rely on shortcuts. Psychologists call them heuristics. Instead of carefully analyzing every decision, we default to simple rules. Expensive must mean high quality. A sharp dresser must be competent. If everyone else is laughing, the joke must be funny. These shortcuts are efficient, but they also make us vulnerable. Manipulators know exactly how to exploit them. Take priming, for example. In one famous study, participants who were subtly exposed to words related to old age, like wrinkled or Florida, later walked more slowly down a hallway than those who hadn't seen the words. They had no idea their behavior had been altered, but it was. Just seeing certain ideas planted seeds in their subconscious. Now imagine how marketers, influencers, and politicians use priming on you every single day. A slogan, a song, a color, a piece of imagery. They're all capable of bending your behavior minutes or hours later. Another trick is anchoring. If I tell you Turkey has a population greater or less than 80 million, and then ask you to guess the actual number, your answer will usually hover close to 80 million, even if you don't know the true figure. The first number you hear sticks in your mind like a hook, and it drags your judgment toward it. That's why stores mark items with fake, original prices. A jacket labeled $2.99. Now 99 feels like a bargain because your brain can't escape the anchor of the first number. Then there's mirroring. Have you ever felt an instant bond with someone you just met, as if you've known them forever? Often that's not chemistry, it's a trick. By subtly copying your gestures, posture, or tone of voice, they trigger your subconscious sense of similarity. Your brain interprets sameness as safety, and safety as trust. Without realizing it, you begin to like and agree with someone who's merely reflecting you back to yourself. Your environment is also designed to manipulate you. Casinos pump oxygen into the air, flood the floor with lights, and strip away clocks so you lose your sense of time. Fast food restaurants use uncomfortable seats and loud colors, not to energize you, but to make you eat quickly and leave. Supermarkets force you to walk past aisles of tempting items before you reach the essentials in the back. Every detail has been engineered to push you toward choices you didn't intend to make. And few forces are stronger than scarcity. When something feels limited, your brain instantly values it more. A message like, "Only 3 seats left," or "Offer ends tonight," creates a sense of urgency that drives you to act without thinking. This is why online retailers bombard you with countdown timers and low stock warnings. Even in relationships, people sometimes exploit scarcity, making themselves less available so others chase harder. It's not love, it's manipulation. The truth is that these triggers rarely appear alone. They layer on top of each other, weaving a web that is nearly impossible to escape. Picture yourself on a shopping website. The product you're looking at has a fake, original price, setting an anchor. The site claims that other buyers are raving about it, giving you social proof. A flashing message tells you that only 2 items remain in stock, while a countdown timer ticks down the minutes. You find yourself buying without stopping to ask whether you even need the item. That's not free will, that's a carefully engineered trap. But here's what makes this so chilling. Even if you're aware of these triggers, you're not immune. Knowing about priming doesn't make you invincible to it. Anchoring still colors your judgment even when you understand the trick. Awareness can help you slow down, but the subconscious forces at work are older, deeper, and stronger than your conscious control. And these triggers don't just control your shopping habits or small choices. They extend to something much bigger. They dictate loyalty, obedience, and even morality. If hidden cues can push you to buy a coffee or click a button, imagine what happens when they're used to control your willingness to follow orders, even orders that clash with your deepest values. This brings us to something far darker, the psychology of obedience and submission. In the 1960s, a psychologist named Stanley Milgram conducted one of the most disturbing experiments of all time. Volunteers believed they were helping with a learning test. They were instructed to deliver electric shocks to another person each time that person answered incorrectly. With every mistake, the shocks grew stronger, eventually reaching levels that could kill. The person receiving the shocks wasn't real. He was an actor. But the volunteers didn't know that. They heard his screams, his pleas, his silence. And yet, more than 60% of them kept pressing the switches until the very end. All because a calm man in a white lab coat told them to continue. These weren't sadists. They were ordinary people. And they obeyed. The reason lies in the authority trigger. From childhood, we're trained to respect authority, teachers, bosses, experts, leaders. The sight of a uniform, a title, or a credential automatically lowers our resistance. It makes us defer, even when our conscience screams that something is wrong. A scammer who pretends to be a bank official, a cult leader in robes, or a politician using lofty language, all tap into this instinct. Obedience isn't just about fear, though. Submission can actually feel comfortable. When someone else takes responsibility, the burden of choice vanishes. If the outcome is bad, you can tell yourself it wasn't your fault, you were just following instructions. That comfort is a trap. Manipulative leaders exploit it by creating crises, then presenting themselves as the only solution. In the panic, people surrender control. And if authority isn't enough, there's the crushing power of group pressure. In another classic study, psychologist Solomon Asch showed participants simple lines on a board. The answer was obvious, but when actors in the room gave deliberately wrong answers, most participants followed along. They betrayed their own eyes just to fit in. Belonging matters more than truth. Now imagine authority and group pressure combined. That's when obedience becomes almost impossible to resist. It's not usually a giant leap either. It happens in small steps. First, you agree to something harmless. Then a little more. Then more still. By the time you're asked to do something truly wrong, it feels like just another step. This is how cults recruit. This is how soldiers learn to commit atrocities. This is how corporate employees get dragged into fraud. The chain of obedience is forged link by link. Fear and reward tighten that chain. Fear of punishment keeps you from disobeying, while the promise of rewards, status, praise, advancement, pulls you forward. A manipulator often offers both, dangling approval while threatening exclusion or punishment if you resist. The mix of fear and reward can override morality itself. The scariest part is that obedience isn't reserved for bad people. History's darkest moments were carried out by ordinary men and women who convinced themselves they were simply doing their jobs. The guards at concentration camps, the functionaries who signed orders, the workers who looked away, they weren't monsters. They were people like us. The lesson is brutal. Under the right conditions, even good people will obey evil commands. So how do you resist? The first step is awareness. Question authority, no matter how official they look. Slow down when someone pushes urgency, because urgency kills critical thinking. Remember that obeying doesn't absolve you of responsibility. And seek out allies who value truth, because standing alone against a group is almost unbearable. But standing with others makes resistance possible. Obedience is powerful, but there's something even more insidious. Persuasion. Obedience forces you to act against your will. Persuasion makes you believe the action was your own idea all along. Persuasion doesn't order you, it seduces you. And once you understand how that works, you'll see just how fragile free will really is. Persuasion is not about shouting commands or forcing compliance. It is about gently steering, carefully nudging, and planting thoughts so deep in your mind that when you act, you feel as though it was entirely your own choice. That is the dark beauty of persuasion. It hides in plain sight, and the more invisible it feels, the more powerful it becomes. Think for a moment about the last time you said yes to something you hadn't planned on. Maybe you agreed to buy a product you didn't need. Maybe you gave someone a chance even though your instincts told you not to. Maybe you signed up, subscribed, or committed without knowing exactly why. That wasn't random. That was persuasion at work. Unlike obedience, persuasion doesn't rely on authority or fear. It relies on psychological levers that twist your perception until saying yes feels like the easiest, most natural thing in the world. These levers are so ancient and universal that they can bypass your rational mind and tap directly into the instincts that govern survival, belonging, and desire. One of the most powerful tools of persuasion is reciprocity. Humans are wired to repay kindness. If someone gives you something, you feel an almost irresistible pull to give something back. That's why salespeople hand out free samples. The tiny gift isn't really about generosity. It's a trigger. Once you accept it, you feel obligated. Even if you don't notice it, part of you feels rude if you walk away empty-handed. Street performers use this trick brilliantly. They hand you a flower or a trinket, and once it's in your hand, refusing to pay feels uncomfortable. You tell yourself you're just being polite, but really you're being persuaded. Then there's commitment and consistency. Once you make a small commitment, you feel pressure to remain consistent with it, even if the stakes rise. Psychologists call this the foot-in-the-door effect. If you agree to sign a petition for a cause, you're more likely later to donate money to it. If you agree to try a free trial, you're more likely to become a paying customer. You justify it by telling yourself, well, I already said yes once, so I might as well continue. In truth, your desire for consistency is being used against you. Social proof is another irresistible lever. When you're unsure of what to do, you look to others for cues. If everyone else seems to be laughing, clapping, or buying, you're more likely to join in. It feels safe, it feels correct, it feels normal. That's why advertisers plaster products with bestseller labels, even when the claim is meaningless. That's why influencers brag about how many followers they have, because numbers persuade. You assume popularity equals value, even when it doesn't. Liking is just as powerful. We are more easily persuaded by people we like, and we tend to like people who flatter us, who look attractive, or who seem similar to us. This is why con artists often begin with compliments. It's why politicians try to appear relatable, eating the same food as the common person or joking about their childhood. The more you like them, the less critical you become of what they're actually saying. Scarcity plays a role here too, but not just in purchases. Scarcity can be used in persuasion to create urgency around opportunities, relationships, or information. If you believe something is rare, you value it more, whether it's a product, a chance, or even someone's attention. That is why limited time offers, only 3 left, and exclusive insider access are so common. They make you feel as though missing out would be a mistake, and so you say yes before you've thought it through. Another chilling tactic of persuasion is framing. The way information is presented shapes the way you see it. If a doctor tells you a treatment has a 90% survival rate, you'll likely feel confident about it. If the same doctor tells you the treatment has a 10% death rate, you'll hesitate, even though both statements mean the exact same thing. Politicians frame policies in terms of safety, freedom, or fairness, knowing that whichever frame they choose will direct your emotions. Marketers frame prices in terms of savings rather than cost. Framing doesn't change the facts, it changes your feelings. One of the most subtle forms of persuasion is storytelling. Facts are forgettable. Stories are not. A good story bypasses logic and goes straight to emotion. When someone tells you a personal story, you instinctively lower your guard because you're no longer analyzing, you're imagining. You picture yourself in their place. You feel what they feel. Stories persuade not by arguing, but by transporting. That's why every major brand, movement, or leader uses stories. They don't just tell you what to think. They tell you a tale that makes you want to believe. And then there's the contrast principle, another invisible manipulator. If I show you a watch priced at $10,000 and then another at $2,000, the second suddenly feels cheap, even though it's still expensive. Your brain compares instead of evaluating independently. Salespeople know this. They'll show you the high-priced option first, not because they expect you to buy it, but because it makes the reasonable option look irresistible. Contrast isn't about the thing itself, it's about what you saw before it. Perhaps the darkest aspect of persuasion is when it becomes personal, when someone learns your weaknesses and tailors their influence to fit them. If they sense you crave approval, they shower you with praise. If they sense you fear rejection, they hint at abandonment. If they sense you long for power, they offer opportunities to lead. This kind of persuasion is surgical. It doesn't work on everyone, but it doesn't need to. It only needs to work on you. What makes persuasion so dangerous is that it often feels pleasant. You don't feel forced. You feel flattered, included, valued. You feel like the decision was yours. That's the trap. When you're obeying authority, you can sometimes sense the pressure. But when you're being persuaded, you rarely notice. You tell yourself a story that fits. You bought it because you wanted it, you agreed because it made sense, you joined because it felt right. You forget the subtle nudges that pushed you there. And persuasion doesn't just sell products or win arguments. It shapes politics, it forges movements, it creates cults of personality. A skilled persuader can talk ordinary people into extraordinary devotion. They can convince you to abandon reason, betray your interests, even risk your life because you'll believe it was your idea all along. If obedience chains you through fear, persuasion seduces you through desire. And when persuasion reaches its darkest form, it doesn't just change what you do, it changes what you believe is real. It makes you question your memory, your judgment, and even your sanity. That is the essence of gaslighting, and it is the next level of psychological manipulation you need to see for what it truly is. Gaslighting is one of the most insidious forms of manipulation because it does not simply change what you do, it rewrites your very sense of reality. Unlike persuasion, which gently nudges you, gaslighting erases your confidence in your own thoughts, memories, and perceptions. It is psychological warfare, and it leaves its victims doubting the one thing they should always be able to trust: their own mind. The term comes from a 1944 film called Gaslight, in which a husband slowly manipulates his wife into believing she is losing her sanity. He dims the gas lamps in their home and then insists that nothing has changed when she notices. He hides objects, then tells her she misplaced them. He whispers lies until she no longer trusts her own memory. By the end, she is utterly dependent on him for her version of reality. That story was fiction, but the tactic it revealed was so chilling and so real that it gave birth to the word we still use today. Gaslighting often begins subtly. A manipulator might dismiss your concerns as overreactions. They may tell you that you're being too sensitive, that you're imagining things, or that you're remembering events incorrectly. First, you may brush it off, but when these moments repeat, they start to chip away at your certainty. The manipulator presents themselves as calm, logical, and in control, while you are painted as emotional, irrational, or forgetful. Over time, the roles invert, you stop trusting yourself and start trusting them. Imagine arguing with someone about a simple fact, say what time you agreed to meet. You are certain you said 6 o'clock. They insist it was 7. You remember clearly, but they act so confident, so unwavering, that you start to second-guess yourself. Maybe you misremembered. Maybe you weren't paying attention. Now picture that happening not once, but over and over on bigger and bigger issues. The erosion of your trust in yourself becomes complete. What makes gaslighting particularly effective is that it attacks you in the places you are most vulnerable. If you already doubt your memory, they will lean on that. If you are afraid of being seen as unstable, they will use that fear. If you crave validation, they will withhold it until you bend. The goal is to isolate you from your own truth until the only version of reality that feels solid is the one they provide. In relationships, gaslighting can trap people for years. A partner might deny ever saying cruel things, even when you remember them vividly. They might insist you are overreacting to behavior that genuinely hurts you. They might compare you to others, saying no one else has a problem with them, so clearly the problem must be you. The more you argue, the more they twist your words, until you are exhausted and silent. Silence, after all, is the manipulator's victory. Gaslighting also thrives in groups and institutions. Leaders who want control over their followers will often use it on a massive scale. They deny facts that are plainly visible. They rewrite history, insist that something that happened yesterday never occurred, or claim responsibility for successes they had no hand in. When challenged, they dismiss critics as delusional, unstable, or dishonest. Over time, the group begins to question its own perception of reality, relying on the leader as the sole source of truth. This is how cults grow. This is how authoritarian regimes tighten their grip. Even in everyday life, you have probably seen smaller versions of gaslighting. A boss who insists they gave instructions you never heard. A friend who claims you agreed to something you know you didn't. A family member who denies past events that hurt you. Each denial may seem trivial, but together they create a fog of uncertainty. If you can't trust your memory, you can't trust yourself. And if you can't trust yourself, you become much easier to control. Gaslighting works because of a deep human instinct, the need for certainty. When reality feels unstable, we cling to whatever anchor seems steady. If the manipulator insists with absolute confidence, while you waver with doubt, your mind instinctively gravitates toward their version. Certainty feels safer than confusion, even if certainty is built on lies. One of the darkest tricks within gaslighting is the use of intermittent reinforcement. The manipulator doesn't always deny your reality. Sometimes they will agree with you, validate you, or even praise you. Then, just as you start to regain confidence, they switch back, undermining you again. This back and forth keeps you off balance. It trains your brain to chase their approval, hoping for the next moment of validation, even as you sink deeper into dependency. The effects of gaslighting are devastating. Victims describe feeling as though they are losing their minds. They develop anxiety, depression, and self-doubt. They apologize constantly. They stop trusting their own judgment. Some even become afraid to make decisions without the manipulator's input because they no longer believe their own choices are valid. This is exactly the outcome the manipulator wants: total reliance. Escaping gaslighting is difficult but not impossible. The first step is recognizing the pattern. If you find yourself constantly second-guessing your memory, your feelings, or your sanity, ask why. Is it because reality is truly unclear, or because someone is working hard to blur it? Pay attention to how you feel after conversations. Do you feel smaller, weaker, or more confused every time you engage with a certain person? That is a red flag. Another key to breaking free is external validation. Talk to people you trust. Keep written records of conversations or events. Journals, texts, or emails can anchor you to the truth when someone tries to twist it. Manipulators thrive in isolation. The more cut off you are from others, the easier you are to control. That's why building a network of trusted voices is essential. But perhaps the most important step is reclaiming your trust in yourself. You do not need someone else to validate your reality for it to be real. If you saw it, if you felt it, if you remember it, then it happened. Learning to hold that confidence, even in the face of denial, is how you break the spell. It is not easy because gaslighting targets the very core of your mind. But once you see the tactic clearly, its power begins to crack. Gaslighting is manipulation in its purest form. It doesn't force your body. It doesn't just persuade your actions. It takes over your reality. And once someone can control your reality, they can control everything else about you. But gaslighting is only one set of tools in the manipulator's arsenal. There are others, primal emotional levers that dig into fear, guilt, and desire. These aren't subtle tricks. They are blunt, powerful weapons that have been used for centuries to bend human will. Once you see how they operate, you'll understand why even the strongest minds are vulnerable. Fear, guilt, desire. These are the oldest weapons in the arsenal of manipulation, older than words, older than civilization itself. They cut straight past logic and go directly to the core of the human nervous system. When persuasion and gaslighting work like subtle whispers, fear, guilt, and desire are thunderclaps. They do not ask politely. They command your mind with a force that feels impossible to resist. Let's begin with fear. Fear is primal. It's the oldest survival mechanism in the human brain, and it exists to keep you alive. When you sense danger, your body reacts before your conscious mind has time to think. Your heart races, your muscles tense, adrenaline floods your system. You don't need to analyze, you either fight, flee, or freeze. Manipulators know this, and they exploit it. They don't need you to think. They only need you to feel afraid. Once you are in that state, your rational defenses collapse, and you become easy to control. Fear shows up everywhere. Governments and leaders use it when they exaggerate threats, real or imagined, and then present themselves as the only protection. Companies use it when they tell you that without their product, you are unsafe, unattractive, or unworthy. Even in personal relationships, Fear is wielded like a blade. Fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of conflict. A controlling partner might threaten to leave, not physically, but emotionally, knowing the terror of being alone will keep you compliant. Fear is not just about monsters in the dark. It is about the things you most desperately want to avoid losing. But if fear is the stick, guilt is the chain. Where fear punishes, guilt enslaves. Guilt manipulates by turning your own conscience against you. Think of the last time someone made you feel guilty for saying no. Maybe it was a friend who reminded you of all the times they were there for you when you couldn't return the favor. Maybe it was a parent sighing about how much they've sacrificed for you. Maybe it was a boss implying that if you don't stay late, you're letting everyone else down. That tightening in your chest, that sense of obligation, that's guilt doing its work. The danger of guilt is that it feels like morality. It makes you believe you are the one at fault, that you are failing, that you are selfish. Manipulators use guilt because it doesn't feel like coercion. It feels like your own conscience speaking. And that's why it is so effective. When guilt is weaponized, you are punished not with physical pain, but with the crushing weight of shame. Keeps you obedient not out of fear of others, but out of fear of yourself. And then there is desire. Desire is not as painful as fear or guilt, but it is just as binding. Humans are creatures of craving. We crave comfort, status, intimacy, recognition, pleasure. Advertisers know this. They don't sell you products, they sell you the image of who you could become. The car isn't about wheels and an engine. It's about desire for freedom, power, attraction. The clothes aren't about fabric. They're about desire for approval and belonging. The manipulator doesn't offer you the truth. They offer you what you want most, wrapped in a package that looks irresistible. Desire works especially well because it feels good. Unlike fear and guilt, which push you away from pain, desire pulls you toward pleasure. This is why people fall for scams promising riches, beauty, or success. It is why toxic relationships can feel addictive. The manipulator knows exactly what you crave and feeds it to you in just the right doses to keep you hooked. Like a drug dealer offering the first taste for free, they give you just enough of the object of desire to create dependence, then control you by threatening to take it away. The most dangerous manipulators do not choose between fear, guilt, and desire. They use them together, weaving them into a perfect trap. Imagine this. Someone offers you a rare opportunity that promises to fulfill your deepest desire. You want it badly, but then they add, if you don't take this chance, you'll regret it forever. You'll miss out. You'll fail. That's desire mixed with fear of loss. And if you hesitate, they twist the knife. After everything I've done for you, you're really going to turn me down? That's guilt closing the cage. Alone, each emotion is powerful. Together, they are devastating. History is full of examples. Cults promise salvation, love, or enlightenment. That's desire. They warn that leaving the group will bring eternal damnation or ruin. That's fear. And when members question, they remind them of the sacrifices the group has made for them. That's guilt. Governments have done the same, stirring up fear of enemies, offering desires of prosperity and safety, and guilting citizens into silence for not being loyal enough. Even in families, parents sometimes use this triad unconsciously, dangling love as a desire, threatening abandonment as fear, and reminding children of sacrifices as guilt. What makes these emotional weapons so effective is that they bypass reason. You can argue against a logical point. You can question evidence. But when fear has your heart pounding, when guilt twists in your stomach, when desire floods your imagination, reasoning feels impossible. The emotional brain is faster than the logical brain, and by the time logic catches up, the damage is already done. So how do you fight back? The first step is awareness. When you feel an intense emotional pull, terror, shame, or craving, pause and ask yourself, is this feeling being used against me? Fear is useful when a lion is chasing you. But when fear is triggered by a headline, a sales pitch, or a threat from someone you love, it may not be real danger, it may be control. Guilt is useful when you've truly harmed someone. But when it's used to make you act against your own interests, it's manipulation. Desire is beautiful when it motivates you to grow, but when it is dangled like bait, it is a trap. The second step is separation. When you recognize the emotion, step back from it. Ask, if I weren't afraid, guilty, or desperate for this, what would I actually choose? By detaching from the emotional charge, you regain space to think. Manipulators don't want you thinking. They want you reacting. Refusing to react is an act of resistance. And the third step is reclaiming control of your triggers. Instead of letting others weaponize your fear, guilt, and desire, learn to own them. Accept that fear is natural but not always accurate. Accept that guilt can teach but also deceive. Accept that desire can guide but also blind. Once you own these emotions, they lose their power to enslave you. Still, even if you master these defenses, there is a deeper problem. Fear, guilt, and desire reveal something unsettling about free will itself. Because if your choices can be bent so easily by these primal levers, how free are you really? Are you ever truly making independent choices? Or are you just following a script written long before you knew it existed? That question leads us to something even darker: the illusion of free will. We like to believe we are free, that when we make a choice what to buy, who to love, what to believe, it comes from our own independent mind. But what if that feeling of freedom is itself an illusion? What if every decision you make has been shaped, nudged, or even scripted by forces you barely notice? The illusion of free will is one of the most unsettling truths in psychology, because it challenges the very foundation of who we think we are. Imagine standing in front of a vending machine. You look at the rows of snacks and feel free to choose anything you want. Chips? Chocolate? A soda? Feels like your decision. But the truth is, your choice has already been limited. The machine doesn't offer fruit, or water, or a home-cooked meal. You are only choosing from what was placed before you. Your freedom exists inside boundaries someone else designed. And that's how life often works. You are free to choose, but only within the options society, culture, or manipulators allow. Advertisers understand this deeply. They don't need to control your every thought. They just need to place the right options in front of you and make one look slightly more appealing. You think you made a free decision, but the colors, the packaging, the placement on the shelf, all of it was engineered to guide you. The illusion of choice is enough. People rarely question the box they are choosing from, only the items inside. But this goes beyond products. Social norms, traditions, and cultural stories act like invisible vending machines, shaping the range of acceptable choices. For instance, when you pick a career, marry, or even vote, you believe you are deciding freely. Yet the values drilled into you since childhood, the role models you saw, the fears society taught you, all of these push you toward certain paths and away from others. How much of that is truly your choice, and how much was chosen for you long before you were aware? This illusion of free will is amplified by something psychologists call priming. Simply exposing you to a word, an image, or an idea can shift your behavior without you realizing it. In one experiment, people who were subtly exposed to words about old age, like wrinkle or gray, actually walked more slowly afterward, as though their bodies had absorbed the suggestion. They didn't choose to slow down. Their behavior was nudged invisibly. If such tiny cues can shape your actions, imagine how much influence larger, deliberate cues have. Then there's the problem of habits. Most of what you do every day is not the result of conscious decision-making. It's automatic. You brush your teeth, check your phone, eat the same breakfast, drive the same route, respond the same way to the same situations. These patterns feel comfortable, but they also mean your choices are often just loops running on autopilot. A manipulator doesn't need to break your will. They only need to create a habit in you that serves their goals. Once it's locked in, you'll repeat it without thinking, believing it's your choice. One of the darkest aspects of this illusion is the way your brain creates stories to justify your behavior. Neuroscientists have discovered that the brain often makes decisions before you are even consciously aware of them. In some experiments, machines can predict whether a person will press a button seconds before the person consciously chooses. Your brain decides, then your conscious mind creates a story that explains the choice as though you made it freely. In other words, your sense of free will may be a story your brain tells you after the fact. This is fertile ground for manipulators. If your mind is constantly inventing reasons for decisions you didn't consciously make, all they need to do is plant the seed. You'll water it yourself. Think of an advertisement that flashes an image so quickly you don't consciously notice it, yet later you find yourself craving the product. You'll tell yourself you just felt like it, unaware that the craving was planted. Think of a cult leader who repeats the same phrase until it becomes a reflex in your head. When you act on it, you'll believe it was your idea. Free will also crumbles under the weight of authority and conformity. When you go along with the group or obey a leader, you often feel as though you're making a personal choice. I decided to follow, but was it really your decision? Or was it the invisible pressure of wanting to belong, to avoid punishment, to feel safe? Most people underestimate how deeply social influence shapes them. They think they are individuals when in fact they are carrying out scripts written by the group. The illusion of free will becomes especially dangerous in the hands of skilled manipulators. They don't need to force you. They don't need to argue with you. They just need to construct the environment so carefully that every path leads where they want you to go. They design the vending machine, and no matter what you pick, you are still choosing within their trap. And because you felt free, you don't resist. You don't rebel against a choice you think you made yourself. But why is this illusion so powerful? Because the human ego clings to freedom. We need to believe we are in control. To admit otherwise feels terrifying, like we are puppets dancing on invisible strings. So when manipulators pull the strings, we don't notice. Our pride blinds us. We defend our decisions even when they weren't ours to begin with. Does this mean free will is completely fake? Not necessarily. It means that free will is fragile, and unless you guard it, it can be hijacked. Real freedom requires awareness. It requires asking not just, what am I choosing? But, who gave me these options? Why do I want this? Whose voice is in my head? When you slow down and look behind the curtain, you sometimes see the hand that is pulling the levers. That awareness is the beginning of true choice. Still, there's another side to this story, one even darker, because it's not just your choices that can be manipulated. It's your very identity. Manipulators know that if they can shape who you believe you are, they don't need to control your decisions directly. You will act in line with that identity automatically. And that takes us into the chilling world of identity manipulation. Identity is the deepest layer of the human mind. It's the story you tell yourself about who you are. Your name, your roles, your beliefs, your values, these are not just labels. They are anchors that guide every choice you make. If someone can rewrite your identity, they don't need to force you to do anything. You'll obey without realizing it, because you'll think you're just being yourself. That is the terrifying power of identity manipulation. Think about how identity shapes behavior. If you see yourself as a healthy person, you don't need willpower to avoid fast food. You simply don't eat it because it doesn't fit your identity. If you see yourself as a loyal friend, you'll show up even when it's inconvenient. If you see yourself as a fighter, you won't quit when things get hard. Every action you take is filtered through the question, does this align with who I am? Manipulators exploit this by reshaping that very definition of who you are. One of the simplest ways identity is manipulated is through labels. Once you accept a label, it becomes a lens through which you see yourself. For instance, if someone repeatedly tells you that you're lazy, you might eventually adopt that identity, even if it wasn't true at first. Soon, you'll start acting in ways that confirm it. On the flip side, if someone calls you a natural leader, you might rise to the expectation, making decisions and taking charge simply because that's who you now believe you are. Labels are sticky. Once attached, they change behavior. Groups use identity manipulation constantly. Religious organizations, political parties, fraternities, even fitness communities, all work to shape your sense of self around belonging. You are one of us. You are different from them. You are chosen, special, loyal. Once you internalize the group identity, you will sacrifice, obey, and fight for it, often at your own expense. You're no longer acting for them. You're acting for us, which in your mind has become me. Marketers use the same trick. They don't just sell clothes or gadgets. They sell identities. When you buy luxury brands, you're not just purchasing an object, you're buying the identity of someone who is wealthy, sophisticated, or desirable. When you wear athletic brands, you're not just covering your body, you're aligning with the identity of being strong, disciplined, or adventurous. Every advertisement whispers, "This isn't about what you're buying, this is about who you are." And once you swallow that idea, your spending becomes automatic. The darkest form of identity manipulation happens in abusive relationships and cults. The manipulator slowly dismantles your old identity and replaces it with one that serves their control. They may isolate you from friends and family until you no longer see yourself as part of them. They may shame you for who you used to be, convincing you that your past self was weak, broken, or unworthy. Then they rebuild you in their image. "You are mine. You are nothing without me. You are only valuable if you obey." Once that new identity is carved into you, escape feels impossible, because leaving would mean leaving yourself. Another sinister tactic is weaponizing shame and pride. If you act in line with the identity they gave you, they shower you with praise. If you deviate, they punish you with shame. Over time, you stop questioning. You enforce the identity on yourself because the thought of losing their approval, or your sense of who you are, feels unbearable. This is why victims of manipulation often defend their abuser, or cult members defend their leader, even when it seems irrational to outsiders. To them, it's not just loyalty to another person, it's loyalty to their very self. But identity manipulation doesn't always look obvious. Sometimes it's as simple as nudging you to identify with a belief or a cause. For example, studies show that asking someone to be a voter is far more effective than asking them to vote. Why? Because the first appeal ties the action to identity. People don't just want to act, they want to be. Once you identify as a voter, recycling advocate, or community leader, you will act accordingly without further persuasion. That's why skilled manipulators frame requests in terms of identity, not action. Social media intensifies this. Online, people craft identities with every post, every like, every comment. Influencers know this, and they pull you into tribes. You're a hustler, you're a rebel, you're part of the resistance. The more you engage, the more that identity hardens. Soon, you're not just scrolling, you're defending a digital version of yourself. That's why online arguments feel so personal. It's not just about ideas, it's about identity. And when identity is attacked, people fight as if their life is on the line. The most chilling part is that once your identity is manipulated, you stop noticing the manipulation. You believe you're acting freely. You believe you're standing strong, but you're actually moving along a path someone else designed. Your self becomes the ultimate cage, invisible yet inescapable. Breaking free from identity manipulation is one of the hardest tasks imaginable. It requires questioning the story you tell yourself. Who am I, really? Where did this identity come from? Did I choose it, or did someone hand it to me? These questions are uncomfortable because they shake the ground beneath your feet. But only by asking them can you begin to reclaim yourself. The truth is, your identity is more fluid than you think. It's not a single, fixed story. It's a collection of roles, values, and choices that can be rewritten. Once you see this, manipulators lose their grip, because their biggest weapon is convincing you that identity is permanent. In reality, you can choose which parts to keep, which to discard, and which to rebuild. That realization is the first crack in the prison. But manipulators rarely rely on identity alone. They combine it with other psychological tricks to build an entire system of control. One of the most dangerous of these systems is the echo chamber, a self-reinforcing loop of ideas and voices that traps you in a closed reality. In an echo chamber, manipulation doesn't just touch your actions or your identity. It surrounds you completely, until you can no longer tell where your thoughts end and the manipulator's design begins. An echo chamber is more than just a group of people agreeing with each other. It is a carefully sealed environment where every sound that enters is bounced back louder, repeated until it feels like truth. Inside an echo chamber, you don't just hear ideas, you live inside them. They surround you, they shape your thinking, and soon, they become your reality. And this is where manipulation takes on an almost inescapable form. Think of it like this. When you're outside, your voice blends with the wind, with other voices, with the chaos of the world. But inside a cave, your words bounce back at you. They come back amplified, distorted, filling the space until you can't tell if you're hearing yourself or someone else. That is the power of the echo chamber. It doesn't silence you. It drowns you in familiarity until unfamiliar voices no longer exist. Social media is the perfect breeding ground for echo chambers. Algorithms don't care about truth or falsehood. They care about engagement. And what engages you most is content you already agree with. If you like a video, you'll be shown 10 more just like it. If you follow one influencer, you'll be suggested a dozen who say the same thing. Slowly, your feed becomes a mirror, reflecting your existing beliefs back at you, louder and louder, until you believe they are universal. This is not by accident. Manipulators, whether they are political leaders, marketers, or cult figures, thrive on echo chambers because they know something dangerous. Repetition feels like truth. Psychologists call it the illusory truth effect. The more often you hear something, the more likely you are to believe it, even if it's false. When every post, every comment, every friend in your circle repeats the same message, it begins to feel undeniable. Doubt withers, certainty hardens, and that certainty makes you obedient. Echo chambers also work by creating enemies. It's not enough to say, "We are right." To keep the chamber sealed, it must also say, "They are wrong. They are dangerous. They are liars." Outsiders are mocked, dismissed, or demonized until you stop listening to them altogether. Once that happens, the chamber has you. There is no longer an outside voice that can reach you. You live in a closed loop, where every sound only reinforces itself. History is full of chilling examples. Dictatorships build echo chambers by controlling media, censoring opposition, and flooding citizens with propaganda. Cults isolate their members physically and mentally, cutting off family, friends, and outside information, while repeating doctrine daily. Even modern marketing builds micro-echo chambers. Email lists, loyalty programs, private groups where fans of a brand hear nothing but praise for it. Each environment closes in tighter, until escape feels like betrayal. But the most frightening echo chamber is the one you build around yourself. Every time you unfollow someone who disagrees with you, every time you mute dissent, every time you surround yourself only with those who echo your beliefs, you are sealing your own chamber. Feels safe, feels comforting, but it is also a trap. Because the less you hear other voices, the less you are able to question the ones controlling the chamber. Inside echo chambers, manipulation doesn't need to be sharp or forceful. It becomes ambient, like the air you breathe. You don't feel manipulated because everything you hear feels normal, expected, obvious. That's the genius of it. A single lie told once can be questioned. A single manipulation attempt can be resisted. But 1,000 echoes of the same message? They sink in so deeply they stop feeling like messages. They feel like reality itself. Breaking out of an echo chamber is painful. It requires confronting voices that make you uncomfortable, ideas that challenge your identity, truths that shatter your certainty. Most people avoid this pain, and manipulators count on that. They know you'll prefer the warm cocoon of agreement over the cold shock of doubt. So they keep feeding you comfort until you no longer realize you are trapped. And there's another layer. Echo chambers don't just manipulate individuals, they polarize societies. When one group lives in one chamber and another group in another, their realities diverge so far that they can no longer even speak to each other. Manipulators use this divide to their advantage. A fractured society is easier to control than a united one. And when both sides believe they are absolutely right, both are vulnerable to deeper manipulation. Think about your own world. How many of your beliefs are truly yours, and how many are echoes you've absorbed from your circle, your feed, your culture? When was the last time you seriously engaged with someone who thought differently, not to argue but to listen? If the answer is rarely, then the chamber may already have its grip. The danger of echo chambers is not only that they distort truth, it's that they silence questions. And a mind without questions is the perfect target for manipulation. Once doubt is gone, control is complete. You don't resist what you don't question. But echo chambers are not the only way manipulators close in. Sometimes, instead of surrounding you with endless voices, they go in the opposite direction. They strip away the noise, they isolate you, they leave you alone and vulnerable. And in that silence, they take control of your mind piece by piece. This is the world of isolation and brainwashing, the final, brutal stage of psychological domination. Isolation is one of the most powerful tools of manipulation, because when you are cut off from the outside world, you lose the mirrors that reflect back who you are. You lose balance. You lose perspective. And once you are alone, with no other voices to check your reality, the manipulator's voice becomes the only one that matters. That is where brainwashing begins. Think of how humans are wired. From the moment we are born, we rely on others for survival, for guidance, for understanding the world. Our sense of reality is built in connection with other people. If you hear a strange noise and no one reacts, you relax. If everyone panics, you panic too. We constantly compare our inner experience with the reactions of others. This is why isolation is so effective. It removes the comparison. With no outside reference, the manipulator can define reality for you, and you have no way to resist. Isolation can be physical, like when cults move their members into compounds, cutting them off from friends, family, and society. It can be emotional, like when an abusive partner discourages you from spending time with others, or subtly undermines every relationship you have until you feel completely alone. It can even be digital, like when communities online create walled gardens where members only interact with each other. However it's done, the goal is the same: silence competing voices, so that the manipulator's influence grows unchecked. Once isolation sets in, brainwashing follows. Brainwashing is not magic, it is systematic conditioning. It uses repetition, sleep deprivation, emotional highs and lows, and relentless messaging to wear down your resistance. The manipulator starts by breaking you, removing your anchors, your confidence, your identity. Then they rebuild you according to their design. At first, you may resist, but over time, exhaustion and loneliness grind down your defenses. The more you rely on the manipulator for stability, the more their reality becomes your own. One of the most common brainwashing tactics is repetition. Simple phrases, slogans, or doctrines are drilled into you until they bypass logic and sink directly into memory. You are nothing without us. The world is against you. Only we can save you. These lines repeat until they become reflexive. You no longer analyze them, you simply believe them. Another tactic is alternating cruelty with kindness. First, they tear you down with criticism, rejection, or even abuse. Just when you are at your lowest, they offer comfort, praise, or love. This creates confusion but also dependence. Your brain begins to link pain with the manipulator's approval, and you start craving their acceptance as relief. It's a cycle of abuse disguised as devotion. Sleep deprivation and exhaustion are also common. When your body is weak, your mind is vulnerable. Your ability to think critically collapses, and suggestions sink in without resistance. This is why interrogation techniques, cult initiations, and even some extreme training programs use sleeplessness, hunger, or stress. They weaken you until compliance feels like survival. Isolation and brainwashing are not always violent or obvious. They can be slow, subtle, and disguised as care. A partner who insists, "I only want what's best for you. That's why you shouldn't see those friends." A leader who says, "The outside world is toxic. We are your true family." A company that demands endless loyalty, claiming, "We're not just a job, we're a family." These phrases seem benign, even loving, but they are warning signs. What they really mean is, "We want to be your only voice." Over time, brainwashing doesn't just control your actions, it reshapes your beliefs. Victims often defend their abusers passionately, unable to see the manipulation. To outsiders, this looks irrational. But from the inside, it feels consistent, because the victim's reality has been rewritten. When someone controls your environment, your emotions, your identity, and your perception of truth, they don't need to force obedience. You will give it freely because in your mind it feels right. One of the most chilling aspects of brainwashing is that it doesn't always leave obvious scars. Some victims walk away believing they chose everything willingly. They may never realize the extent of the control because the manipulator built the cage in their mind, not on their body. And cages built in the mind are the hardest to see and the hardest to break. Yet even this is not the final form of manipulation. Isolation and brainwashing aim to control the present, but the most advanced manipulators reach further. They don't just trap you in the now. They rewrite your memories, your sense of the past. If they can change your past, they can change who you are. And that is the deepest level of psychological domination. Memory is the foundation of your identity. Every decision you make, every belief you hold, every emotion you feel, these all rest on the story of your past. You are who you remember yourself to be. That's why memory manipulation is one of the darkest and most powerful forms of control. If someone can alter your memories, they can alter who you are. The unsettling truth is this: memory is not a perfect recording. It is not a video camera capturing reality. Memory is fragile, fluid, and shockingly easy to distort. Each time you recall an event, your brain reconstructs it, filling in gaps, reshaping details, blending imagination with fact. Then it saves the altered version as if it were the original. This means every memory is vulnerable to suggestion. Manipulators know this and they exploit it. Consider the power of suggestion. If someone repeatedly insists that something happened, even if it didn't, you may eventually remember it. Psychologists have planted false memories in experiments by simply describing events that never occurred. Participants later recall these fabricated moments vividly, complete with details that never existed. This phenomenon is called false memory, and it shows how unreliable our sense of the past really is. In personal relationships, manipulators weaponize this constantly. A partner may deny cruel words they once said, insisting, "That never happened, you're imagining it." At first, you resist. But if they repeat the denial long enough, you begin to doubt your memory. Maybe you exaggerated. Maybe you misunderstood. Eventually, you rewrite the memory in their favor. Gaslighting, which we explored earlier, thrives on this vulnerability. But memory manipulation goes further. It doesn't just make you question. It makes you remember wrong. Cult leaders use this tactic on a larger scale. They rewrite the history of the group, erasing failures, magnifying victories, inventing stories of miracles or persecution. Over time, members internalize these false histories as their own memories. They genuinely believe they witnessed events that never occurred. In some extreme cases, they may even remember traumas or betrayals implanted by suggestion, memories that bind them to the group more tightly. Governments and institutions also engage in memory manipulation, though on a societal level. When history books are rewritten, when photographs are altered, when inconvenient events are erased, collective memory shifts. Future generations grow up with a version of the past that never truly existed. They believe it wholeheartedly because they were never given the real story. George Orwell warned about this in 1984. Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. It isn't just fiction. It happens every day. What makes memory manipulation so dangerous is that it feels authentic. When you recall a false memory, it doesn't feel different from a real one. The emotions are real, the details vivid, the conviction unshakable. You would swear under oath that it happened. And if your very identity rests on those memories, then a false memory reshapes your self-image. Imagine being convinced you were once weak when you weren't, or that you were once saved when you weren't, or that you once harmed someone when you didn't. Each of these false memories would bend your identity into a shape designed by the manipulator. Memory can also be manipulated by omission. Sometimes it's not about planting new memories but erasing old ones. Traumatic events, for instance, can be buried under repeated denial until the victim questions whether they ever happened. Or positive memories of independence can be drowned out by constant reminders of past mistakes, until the victim forgets their moments of strength. By controlling which memories you focus on, a manipulator controls the story you tell yourself. Even the media uses memory manipulation techniques. Consider how repetition of certain narratives can overshadow others. If a story is reported endlessly, it becomes etched into collective memory, while equally important stories fade away. Over time, the public remembers what was repeated and forgets what was silenced. It's not just about what happened, it's about what we are allowed to remember. But here's the most chilling part. You manipulate your own memory, too. Each time you tell a story about your life, you polish it, adjust it, shape it. You might emphasize certain details, downplay others, or add pieces you heard from someone else. Over time, your retelling becomes the memory. Manipulators know this and encourage you to retell events in ways that serve their narrative. They nod, they prompt, they reward you for remembering it their way. Eventually, you convince yourself, if memory is so fragile, how can you defend yourself? One strategy is to keep external records. Journals, photographs, recordings, and written notes can serve as anchors when your memory is challenged. Another is to seek multiple perspectives. If others remember an event differently, compare stories, but with caution because their memories are just as fallible. The most important defense is awareness. Knowing that memory is vulnerable keeps you cautious when someone tries to rewrite it for you. Still, no matter how vigilant you are, memory manipulation exposes an uncomfortable truth. Reality itself is malleable. If your past can be rewritten, then your present and future are at risk too. Because what you believe about yesterday determines how you act today, and what you do today shapes tomorrow. A manipulated memory doesn't just alter your history, it reshapes your destiny. And this leads us to the ultimate question. Why are all these manipulations so effective? Why do fear, persuasion, identity, echo chambers, isolation, and memory all bend the human mind so easily? The answer lies in the hidden design of the human brain itself. Manipulators don't create weaknesses, they exploit the ones already built into us. To truly understand how manipulation works, we must uncover these hidden weaknesses of the human mind. The human mind is a marvel, capable of creativity, problem-solving, and imagination so vast that it has reshaped the planet. But beneath its brilliance lies a structure full of cracks. These cracks are not flaws by accident. They are shortcuts, survival mechanisms, and biases that once helped us navigate the ancient world. Yet in the modern age, these same shortcuts become doors through which manipulators walk right into your thoughts. To understand why manipulation works so well, you must first confront the hidden weaknesses wired into your mind. Let's start with cognitive biases. Your brain is constantly bombarded with information, far more than it can process at once. To cope, it relies on mental shortcuts. These shortcuts are efficient but often inaccurate. For example, confirmation bias pushes you to notice evidence that supports your beliefs and ignore evidence that contradicts them. A manipulator doesn't need to invent new facts. They just feed you the ones you're already inclined to accept. Over time, this bias cements false beliefs until they feel immovable. Then there's authority bias. Humans are social creatures, and in ancient times, survival often depended on following leaders, whether hunters, chiefs, or elders. Today, this instinct makes us more likely to trust people in positions of power, even when they are wrong. When a figure wears a suit, speaks confidently, or carries a title, we unconsciously give their words extra weight. Manipulators exploit this by presenting themselves as experts or surrounding themselves with symbols of authority. Your brain sees the image of power, and the bias kicks in. They must know better than me. Another weakness lies in the availability heuristic. Your mind judges how likely something is to be true based on how easily examples come to mind. That's why sensational news stories, plane crashes, terrorist attacks, rare diseases, loom so large in our perception of risk. Manipulators flood you with vivid examples, not accurate statistics. Once your mind can easily picture something, you overestimate its importance. This is how fear is amplified, how panic is spread, how societies are nudged into compliance. Social proof is another powerful crack in the mind. When you are unsure what to do, you look to others. If everyone around you is clapping, you clap. If everyone is silent, you stay quiet. This instinct kept our ancestors safe in uncertain environments, but in the hands of manipulators, it becomes a leash. Fake followers, staged applause, or manipulated crowds create the illusion of consensus. Your brain sees others complying and whispers, "This must be right." You obey not because you are convinced, but because everyone else seems convinced. Scarcity is yet another mental lever. When something appears rare, your brain assigns it more value. This comes from survival instincts. When food or resources were scarce, urgency kept us alive. But today, scarcity is manufactured. Only 3 left in stock. Offer ends tonight. Limited seats available. These phrases bypass logic and tap into your survival wiring. Manipulators know that scarcity makes you act impulsively, afraid of missing out on something that might not even matter. The anchoring effect is equally dangerous. When your brain is exposed to a number, that number becomes an anchor influencing all future judgments. A car salesman first shows you the most expensive option, making the next one seem reasonable. A manipulator throws out exaggerated claims so that their smaller lies feel tame. Even if you know the anchor is absurd, it still shapes your decisions subconsciously. Beyond biases, your emotions create vulnerabilities. Fear narrows focus, making you cling to authority. Anger makes you more suggestible, pushing you to act without reflection. Loneliness drives you into the arms of anyone who offers belonging. Hope makes you trust promises that have no foundation. Each emotion, powerful in its own right, can be hijacked. Manipulators don't fight your emotions. They ride them, amplifying what already exists until it controls you. Memory, as we explored earlier, is another weakness. But add to this the fact that your brain often prefers a coherent story over the messy truth. This is called the narrative bias. If events don't make sense, your mind fills in the gaps, even inventing false connections just to maintain order. Manipulators exploit this by giving you simple stories that explain complex realities. They may be false, but they feel satisfying. And in the war between truth and comfort, comfort often wins. There's also the illusion of control. Humans hate uncertainty. We like to believe we're steering the wheel even when we're not. Manipulators feed this need by giving you false choices. Do you want option A or option B? Either way, they win, but you feel empowered because you chose. Casinos thrive on this illusion, as do marketers and politicians. You think you're free, but the game has already been rigged. Finally, there is the most universal weakness, the desire for belonging. Humans cannot survive alone. Our brains are wired to seek community, acceptance, and love. This makes rejection feel like death, and belonging feel like salvation. Manipulators know this, so they create groups, movements, or relationships where loyalty is rewarded and doubt is punished. You conform not because you agree, but because you fear exile. And in your attempt to belong, you hand over your independence. When you put all of these cracks together, biases, emotions, illusions, and instincts, you see a mind that is both brilliant and fragile. Manipulators don't need to be geniuses. They just need to know where to push. They don't need to break you, they only need to guide you into breaking yourself. But the scariest part is this: you can know all of these weaknesses and still fall victim to them. Awareness helps, but it doesn't grant immunity. Even the smartest minds, even psychologists who study manipulation, can be caught in its web. Because manipulation doesn't attack the parts of you that are rational. It attacks the parts of you that are human. And now that we've seen the cracks in the mind, the question becomes, who are the people most skilled at exploiting them? Who are the master manipulators who have bent entire nations, movements, and individuals to their will? To answer that, we must step into the shadows of history, business, and culture, and examine the chilling case studies of the manipulators who perfected this dark art. Throughout history, certain figures stand out not because they led armies, built empires, or discovered new worlds, but because they mastered something far more subtle and insidious: the manipulation of the human mind. These master manipulators didn't need brute force to control people. Instead, they twisted psychology, emotion, and perception until entire populations obeyed willingly, even eagerly. Their methods may differ, but their goal was always the same: power without resistance. Let's step into their world. One of the most infamous manipulators of the 20th century was Adolf Hitler. His rise wasn't powered solely by military strength. It was powered by words, by narrative, by psychology. Hitler understood the desperation of post-war Germany. Poverty, shame, humiliation. He took these wounds and weaponized them. His speeches weren't calm arguments. They were theatrical performances. He used repetition, emotion, and simple slogans that bypassed logic and went straight to the gut. Us versus them. The nation reborn. The enemy among us. He created a story where every German was a hero waiting to be redeemed, and every problem had a scapegoat. Through this narrative, he didn't just lead a country, he reprogrammed it. But manipulation isn't always wrapped in anger and nationalism. Sometimes it wears the mask of love and spirituality. Consider Jim Jones, the cult leader behind the Jonestown tragedy. He began as a charismatic preacher, speaking about equality, community, and compassion. People flocked to him because he offered belonging and purpose. But slowly, he isolated his followers, controlling their daily lives, erasing their independence. By the time he convinced over 900 people to drink poison in a mass suicide, their minds had been so reshaped that they believed it was an act of loyalty, even liberation. His story shows how manipulation can twist the most basic human need, belonging, into a weapon of death. In the corporate world, manipulation often hides in plain sight. Edward Bernays, the so-called father of public relations, revolutionized marketing by applying psychology to advertising. He knew that people don't buy products, they buy feelings, identities, and desires. He turned cigarettes into symbols of freedom, bacon and eggs into the American breakfast, and soap into a cultural ritual. By linking products to emotions rather than logic, he shaped consumer behavior on a massive scale. Bernays didn't just sell goods. He sold ideas that became embedded in everyday life. His influence is still with us every time we buy something, not because we need it, but because it represents who we want to be. Another chilling example is Charles Manson. Unlike Jones, Manson never built a large organization. Yet, with nothing more than charisma, drugs, and a distorted philosophy, he convinced a small group of followers to murder on his command. What made him dangerous was not numbers but intensity. He created an environment where his followers felt chosen, enlightened, and bonded by a mission. By isolating them, flooding them with ideology, and breaking down their sense of self, he turned ordinary people into killers who believed they were fulfilling a higher purpose. Manson shows how manipulation doesn't require scale. It requires complete control over even a few vulnerable minds. Manipulation also thrives in politics and business today, though in subtler forms. Modern media moguls shape public opinion not by lying outright, but by framing information. What stories are shown? What images are repeated? What words are emphasized? A master manipulator doesn't need to invent reality. They only need to highlight certain pieces of it, until your perception is skewed without you realizing it. The skill lies not in creating falsehoods, but in curating truths in a way that leads you to their desired conclusion. One of the most sophisticated manipulators of recent decades was Steve Jobs. Not in the sense of evil, but in the sense of psychological mastery. Jobs didn't just sell technology, he sold identity. He convinced millions that buying Apple products made them creative, unique, part of a movement. The devices were tools, but the real product was the story. His famous reality distortion field came from his ability to bend perception with passion, conviction, and relentless vision. People didn't just follow him because of logic. They followed because he made them feel like believers in something bigger. Jobs demonstrates that manipulation is not always sinister. It can inspire, but the mechanics remain the same. Then there are those who manipulate without ever showing their face. Propagandists, spin doctors, and strategists who work in the shadows. Consider how governments use language. Wars are not invasions, but operations. Civilian casualties become collateral damage. Surveillance becomes security. Words are chosen not to inform, but to soothe and redirect. By softening the harshness of reality, manipulators shape public emotion, dull outrage, and normalize what would otherwise spark rebellion. Language itself becomes a weapon of control. What all of these case studies reveal is that manipulation adapts to its context. In politics, it exploits fear and pride. In religion, it exploits hope and belonging. In business, it exploits desire and identity. In intimate relationships, it exploits love and vulnerability. The tools differ, but the core principle is constant. Find the crack in the mind and pry it open until resistance crumbles. But here's the terrifying part. Many of the most skilled manipulators are invisible. You don't know their names. They design algorithms that decide what you see online. They craft advertisements that blend seamlessly into entertainment. They build platforms that track your behavior, predict your emotions, and subtly nudge your choices. These modern manipulators don't need speeches, cults, or armies. They need data, and with it, they shape your life without you even noticing. The masters of manipulation, past and present, prove one thing. The human mind is not a fortress. It is a house with many doors, and those who know the keys can enter at will. You may think you are immune, but so did millions who cheered for tyrants, followed cult leaders, or bought into illusions. Manipulation doesn't look like control when you're inside it. It looks like belief, loyalty, even love. Which brings us to the final and most important question of all. If manipulation is everywhere, woven into politics, media, business, and even personal relationships, how can you protect yourself? How can you break free before the cage closes around your mind? To answer that, we must explore the strategies of awareness, resistance, and mental defense that can shield you from even the most skilled manipulators. Breaking free from manipulation is not about becoming invincible, it's about becoming aware. You cannot erase the biases and instincts that live inside your brain. You cannot stop your emotions from being triggered. But what you can do is shine a light on the shadows, recognize the tactics as they happen, and reclaim your ability to choose. Awareness doesn't make you untouchable, but it makes you dangerous to manipulators. Because the moment you see the strings, the puppet show loses its power. The first step is learning to pause. Manipulation thrives on speed, quick decisions, impulsive reactions, emotional responses. That's why sales pitches emphasize urgency, why abusers demand instant obedience, why propaganda demands blind loyalty. When you pause, you break the spell. Even a moment of hesitation gives your rational mind time to catch up with your emotional mind. Before you say yes, before you click buy, before you follow the crowd, stop, breathe, and ask, why am I being pushed to act so quickly? Often, the answer reveals the manipulation. The second defense is asking questions, especially the uncomfortable ones. Manipulators hate questions because questions break the illusion. If someone makes a claim, ask for evidence. If they present only one side of a story, ask what the other side is. If they frame a choice as either slash or, ask what the hidden third option is. Curiosity is the enemy of control. The more you ask, the harder it becomes for anyone to trap you in a single narrative. Another strategy is keeping records. When gaslighting or memory manipulation occurs, having a written record can be a lifeline. Journals, saved messages, even simple notes can anchor you to reality when someone tries to rewrite the past. In relationships, this can expose patterns of abuse. In society, independent media and history archives serve the same purpose. Without records, memory is pliable. With them, truth has a chance to survive. Critical thinking is your shield, but skepticism is your sword. Learn to separate emotion from evidence. If a message is making you feel fear, anger, or urgency, pause and examine the content beneath the emotion. Ask yourself, is this true? Or is it just designed to make me feel something? Manipulators are masters of emotional theater. When you strip away the performance, often there's very little substance left. But protection isn't only mental, it's also social. Remember, isolation is one of the most powerful tools of manipulation. To resist, you must stay connected to diverse perspectives. Surround yourself with people who challenge your views, who question your assumptions, who see the world differently. It may feel uncomfortable, but discomfort is growth. A mind exposed only to agreement is a mind already halfway controlled. A mind tested by dissent is a mind harder to cage. Equally important is building self-awareness. Manipulators prey on unmet needs. Your hunger for belonging, your craving for love, your fear of rejection, your desire for certainty. The stronger these needs are hidden in the dark, the easier they are to exploit. By bringing them into the light, you weaken their grip. Ask yourself, what do I want so badly that I would ignore red flags to get it? Once you know the answer, you'll see how manipulators would try to use it against you. Media literacy is another essential defense in the digital age. Recognize clickbait, identify bias, and question sources. Algorithms are designed to feed you what you already believe. To fight back, deliberately seek out alternative viewpoints. Read from different outlets. Follow people with opposing perspectives, and ask, who benefits from me believing this? In a world of curated feeds and echo chambers, intentional variety is your shield. And sometimes, the simplest defense is saying no. Manipulators often count on politeness, on your fear of confrontation, on your hesitation to reject. But you are not obligated to explain every no. You are not required to justify your boundaries. A firm, calm refusal is one of the most powerful weapons against subtle control. Every time you say no, you strengthen your independence. Breaking free also requires courage, the courage to walk away. Whether it's from a toxic relationship, a manipulative leader, or a false narrative, leaving feels terrifying. Manipulators design it that way. They convince you that outside the cage is danger, loneliness, or chaos. But the truth is the opposite. Outside the cage lies freedom. The first step out is the hardest, but each step after becomes easier. Yet even as you build these defenses, remember this: you will never be completely safe. Manipulation is not an external threat. It is woven into the fabric of human interaction. Every advertisement, every speech, every headline is trying to pull your mind in a certain direction. You cannot escape it entirely, but you don't need to. The goal is not to live without influence. It is to recognize influence, weigh it, and choose deliberately. At the core, freedom of mind is not about rejecting every message. It's about deciding for yourself which messages to accept. It's about knowing when you are persuaded because you want to be, not because you were tricked into it. It's about reclaiming authorship of your story instead of letting others write it for you. The manipulators of the world count on your blindness. They count on your silence, your compliance, your sleepwalking through choices. But once you see the patterns, once you learn the triggers, the tactics, the cracks in the mind, they lose their greatest weapon: invisibility. Manipulation thrives in the dark. Awareness is light, and that is the secret your mind doesn't want to admit. You are more vulnerable than you think. You are more persuadable than you'd like to believe. But you are also more powerful than manipulators want you to know. The moment you see the game, you can stop playing it. The moment you see the strings, you can cut them. The world will always be full of voices trying to bend your will. Some will do it for profit, some for power, some even out of misguided love. But in the end, the choice is yours. You can remain a puppet, or you can become the puppeteer of your own life. The first step is awareness. The second is courage. The third is choice. And choice, once claimed, is the purest form of freedom. And if you've made it this far, you already know something most people don't. The mind is not as free as it pretends to be. Now imagine how much more you could uncover if you keep going deeper. That's why I want you to do two things right now. First, hit the like button. Not for me, but for yourself, because the algorithm is just another manipulator. And by liking this, you train it to feed you more truth instead of more lies. Second, subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Think of it as armor. Every new video will sharpen your defenses, reveal another tactic, expose another shadow. And the stronger your awareness grows, the less control anyone will ever have over you. Finally, drop a comment below. Tell me, which manipulation tactic shocked you the most tonight? Your words might open someone else's eyes, and together we can make sure fewer minds stay trapped in cages they can't see. This is not the end, it's just the beginning.